be the church. And I've spoken with many of you individually, and I've seen this in you. I've seen this level of love. I've seen this level of care. I've seen the intentional, okay, but I'm not going to go and talk about this route here. I've seen that. And we need to see more of it collectively as a body. Because at the end of the day, who's in the White House doesn't matter nearly as much as who's coming in glory at the end of days. And that is what I want to be unified on with you, brothers and sisters. That king, the government that will never cease, the government that we just learned about as we were studying in Isaiah, and the coming Christ, that there will be no end, and he will reign with mercy and justice and peace, and he will make all things new again. That's the government that I get excited about. And so if we're going to be unified, it needs to be around that. If we are going to be known by something, it needs to be that. Let all your talk be seasoned with the salt of Christ. So, how then shall we live? Live from the source of the living God. That leads to us not grumbling and not disputing, because we all are drawing from the same source. Now, this is really important, because if we're going to be unified, that's a key factor for this next part. Question 2, how then shall we live? Live holy and set apart. Now, for those of you who know the definition of holy, this may seem like a redundant statement. In some ways it is, but I think it's worth repeating, because holy means set apart. Now, why do I say this? Well, take a look. That you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish, having Christ as your source of life, satisfies you and also sets you apart. Now, there's two ways I can go with this. I at least need to say the first one. If you are in Christ, if you have repented, if you have said, Jesus, I am a sinner and I need you to save me, you are Lord over all, then you are blameless and innocent and a child of God and without blemish before the Father at the day of judgment. You need to know that, because oftentimes I'm about to preach on works. Oftentimes we get in this mode of, well, shucks, I'm just the worst. I'm just so horrible, and he's just not pleased with me, and I got to keep on doing all these works to get him to be pleased in me. Well, that's wrong. That's absolutely dead wrong, okay? If you are a Christian, he is pleased in you, because it goes back to verse 13. For it is God who works in you both to will and to work according to his good pleasure. If he's working in you, if you feel convicted right now, that's him working in you. He's pleased in you, so go forth and live it. Because again, knowing who he is will cause you to be holy and set apart. Now, that's not the main gist of this part, that you may be blameless and innocent. I don't think Paul here is talking about our standing before the judgment seat. I think he's speaking specifically to how we are to live our lives right now. And that's really important. That term blameless can also be translated above reproach. That means that if somebody were to come and accuse you of something, that they themselves will be put to shame because of how you conduct yourself. The bottom line is, church, the only thing the world should be able to hate us for is our love for Christ, not the sin we practice. This has to do specifically with how we live our personal lives. I mean, right on down to the small things, like don't steal the cookie from the cookie jar, right? Like how we talk to our neighbors who we disagree with. How we talk to somebody who calls us names. How we treat our family, our spouses. How we do our taxes. Ugh, that's coming up soon. Right? But living holy and blameless and innocent children of God without blemish, that's something that can only be done whenever Christ is our source. We don't do it as a defense to the world. We do it as an offense. Let me say that again. We don't live holy as a defense. We live holy as an offense. In the Word, it says the gates of hell shall not prevail against us. That means we're marching forward, y'all. And we're about to see that in the next verse here. It says this, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation among whom you shine as lights in the world. I don't need to sell any of us on the fact that we live in the midst of a crooked and wicked generation. Let's focus on that first part, though, in the midst. Oftentimes we think, well, I have to section myself away from the world. You know, I have to live in some weird commune or something like that. Please don't.
As much as we want to. Folks, we live in a generation, and I'm not talking about Gen Z, Gen X, Boomer, what have you. I'm talking just very much just about the generation of man, right? Support that. But we must engage with it. We've got to engage the culture. We have to. That's just one issue. Y'all, if I could boil down every issue in our culture right now, it comes down to identity, especially in our culture out here in the Pacific Northwest. Everyone is trying to figure out, who am I and what gives me value and worth? Am I a man? Am I a woman? Does my identity, does my cultural background give me some sort of identity? Like, who can tell me that I'm worth it? Who can let me know? Because they've bought into the lie that they have to identify who they are, and they have to give themselves value and worth and dignity, and that's wrong. What it looks like to live holy and blameless in the midst of this crooked generation is living as if we know we have our identity. We know who gives us worth, the Holy One of Israel, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the one who died and rose again. We can live victoriously because of that. So it's not just beating people over the head with the Bible. We live holy and righteous in the midst of a crooked and wicked generation as if we know the living God and how good He is. And also the judgment, the rightful judgment that He will bring on the earth.